Lastly, in the Administrator module, we've got some settings here for you. We looked at history settings. History settings are where you set up your save points so that you can view points in time in your object's history. Alright, now we've got some other settings here, but they don't necessarily apply to your implementation. Alright, let's go to General Settings. General Settings is a helpful little tool, actually. It's a setting that you can basically set up to shortcut how your authors insert graphics into their topic objects. Alright, so this particular setting does apply to the Author It module itself, and what it allows you to do is select folders, and when an author then goes to insert a file object, they can see all of the graphics in a thumbnail view from inside of that folder. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'll open up a topic here. Let's open up one that I would actually have modify rights to. Alright. Thumbnail view, let's open that up. Alright, now you have an option here in the Insert menu to insert file objects from a thumbnail view. If I click that, then it is telling me, oh, I'm in the wrong library. Blast. There we go. Alright. Settings. General settings. Okay. It helps if I'm in the right library. If we click Add here, let's add some folders. We'd add folders that contain graphics. So here we've got common content, logos, and icons. So click OK here. Alright. So we've got one folder listed in our thumbnail view. Now let's refresh our library here so we get that setting. Keeping me honest here with the password. Alright, so insert from thumbnail view. It's showing me all of the graphics in the logos and icons folder, and then I can choose these graphics to insert based on the thumbnail view, and I can change the size of these graphics if I'd like to. So if it's a very large folder, then you could perhaps make the graphics a little smaller if you wanted to, or larger depending on what you were comfortable working with. But this allows the authors to see multiple graphics at the same time and then insert them. It's really the only way that an author can see a preview of the file object before they actually import it or insert it into their topic object. So it may be a handy feature for you to set up as an administrator to kind of give your authors a shortcut to inserting file objects into their library. Definitely a nice to have little feature. Alright, now the rest of these settings don't necessarily apply to the Author It module itself. They apply to other modules such as Author It Live. If you had purchased Author It Live, this is where you set up your publishing settings. If you'd purchased Author It Localization Manager, then these two settings would apply to you. So if you're not using those two applications, then you don't need to worry about the rest of the settings in this menu. But just be aware that they are located underneath the settings menu if you should purchase those modules and need to set up those options. Alright. Alright, so this is the Administrator module in a nutshell. Now one last thing I want to show to you before we open it up to questions is to refresh on something that we talked about at the beginning of day one. Alright, and that is our flow of control. All right. Now, throughout this training, what we've done is we've taken a look at author concepts and then how to use each one of the objects that an author would work with. All right. Then we looked at reuse strategies and management strategies and importing. All right. From there, we took a look at the designer functions where we learned about object templates and media objects. Then we learned about customizing our print output and customizing our HTML output. Lastly, we've talked about administration. All right, we've done things in this order because in order for you to really understand what the reasoning behind you would perform certain designer and administrative tasks, you really have to have that authoring role foundation first. Okay, it's hard to conceptualize why you need to set up security or folder structures in a certain way unless you understood what the authoring process was and the tasks that an author would go through. Now, when it comes to doing an implementation, let's say you're new to AuthorIt and you plan on starting to build your AuthorIt library from the ground up, you'd actually work in the reverse of this training, okay? You would go through and you would set up the administrator module first. You create your database, apply your licensing, and then set up your security, perhaps tweak the history settings that you would like to set up for that AuthorIt application, all right? So you're laying that foundation for your designers and your administrators, all right? So once the administrator module is set up, then your designers would step in. They would begin to create the object templates, the external publishing templates, styles and media objects that our authoring role would perform. You'd also want to make some decisions about what reuse and management strategies that you would like your authors to use. You know, maybe that is a collaborative effort between the authors and the designers, but it is the designer role that actually performs those functions. And then lastly, your authors can get into the implementation. They may start off with importing content into the AuthorIt library to maybe move some legacy content into the AuthorIt database so they can start reusing it in other documentation. And they may then also start creating content based on the styles and templates that the designers have set up for them. All right, so this would be the flow that you would go through to establish your AuthorIt library, is to start with the administrators, move up to designers, and then have your authors come in and beginning to import and create content. All right, now one last thing I do recommend is that administrators and designers, you should document what you're doing. All right, so that if you should ever leave the documentation team, you have that legacy material available to you. Or if you plan on training someone to be your backup, you have that documentation already available. All right, and inside of an AuthorIt library by default, we have a book set up for you to get you started in documenting what the designers and administrators have done. All right, underneath Common Content, we've got a folder called Style Guide. And inside of this Style Guide, we've documented the style usage inside of your library. But I would recommend that you take that even further. You document the templates that you've created, when an author would select a certain template, some information about your external publishing templates. Administrators, I would document your security model that you set up, kind of your methodology on why you set up security in a certain way. Maybe talk about when authors would use certain variables or variant criteria. All right, so we've started that document for you. It comes by default with the Authorit library. We would hope that you would expand upon this style guide and keep it up to date for the benefit of your group. And because it is a document inside of the Authorit library, it's very easy for any Authorit user to refer to it as necessary. It's also very easy for you to publish it and then share it with your leadership so that you've got documentation on the workflows and processes that you're going through in case your leadership is interested in that kind of information. Alright, so that's my soapbox on the style guide. I highly recommend it. It's something that the services group provides to each client. If we were to do your implementation, we would create something called the style and usage guide where we document just that. Your styling, the usage of your templates, the usage of variables, variants, and all that good stuff.